So one of the things that we're not very good at in the West is actually talking about death. We almost sort of avoid the issue as if it happens to other people, but it's never going to happen to us. Whereas in the East, of course, they look on death quite differently. They just know that it's just moving into a different dimension, moving into a different room, if you will. So we're going to talk a little bit about what happens during the death process, the dying process. In many cases, not only will you be called on to help with a client making that transition, but also what happens afterwards with the family. And a lot of my own experience has been with people that you've helped one of the members of the family, and then when they pass, the other members of the family want to come to you and ask you questions and get your views on different things. And I had a case many years ago now, the little boy I was working with who was only 8, and Robert, his name was, and he had leukemia. Long story short, but he really took to the healing, he really improved. He'd been told, when his father first brought him, he'd been told he got 3 to 4 weeks of it, and they just gave up on him. There was nothing they could do, just take him home, look after him, make him comfortable. Anyway, his father brought him for healing, and he literally carried him into my house, and I worked with this little lad 3 times a week for probably 6 weeks, 7 weeks, something like that, quite a while. But he really responded well to healing. And within 2 months, he was out playing soccer with his friends and climbing trees and all the things that the kids do. So I started seeing him less, and then after a couple of months, we stopped seeing each other because he was fine. And then we went away on a holiday next year, and several months later, it must have been 8 or 9 months later, we just got in from our vacation, put the suitcases down, and the phone started to ring, and we're back. So I picked up the phone, and it was Robert's father. And he said, I just thought I'd give you a call, let you know that Robert's passed. And I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it. He was this little kid who improved so much. And he went on to say that what had happened, he'd got an infection, his temperature went up. I called the doctor, they injected him with something, and the whole body took a tilt. Then they injected him with something else. And anyway, he passed. So that was pretty traumatic for me, because as always, particularly with young people, you start thinking, well, what could I have done more? What could I have done to help this little lad? But the point I'm trying to make is, after the funeral, after the end of the service, his mother came to me, who I didn't know very well. I'd met her but didn't know her. One of his aunties and two of his aunties and an uncle all came to me asking if they could come and see me. So I said, yeah, of course. So they came to see me individually. They didn't know each other was coming. But what they wanted to know was my thoughts, my views on life after death. So obviously I talked to them, and it occurred to me many, many months later that maybe the reason that Robert had his early transition at 8 years old was to perhaps to start some thinking within these close relatives about spirituality, because they all wanted to know what we thought, what I thought, and what happened, and so on and so forth. And so sometimes I think, although on the surface it really is a tragedy when somebody goes at that age, that a little bit like we were talking yesterday about Angela, maybe that was part of his karmic plan, to come in, to leave very early, to give these other people this opportunity of exploring their own spirituality. And they all did. They all started to become interested in healing and started reading books and so on and so forth. So we all have our views on life and death. But again, it's dangerous to assume that everybody believes the same, because they don't. And I had, in fact she's still alive, she was 90 last week. I had 2 cousins, brother and sister, who lived together. And he was in his 50s, and he became ill, and he died very quickly. Within 3 or 4 weeks, he died. And after the funeral, several weeks after the funeral, I wrote a letter to my other cousin, the one that lived with him, his sister, saying that I'm sure, his name was Harold, I said, I'm sure you feel or sense that Harold's still around you, because obviously that's what often happens. And she wrote this letter back and said, I wish I had your beliefs. I believe there's nothing. There's just darkness. I thought, wow. So we don't all believe the same thing. And I thought that was pretty sad, that she didn't have a belief. But people do not necessarily have that belief system that we do. So it's a very fine line between when do you stop encouraging your client and making enthusiastic goals for them, trying to get them to pull themselves up and get better. When do you reach the point where they want to talk about death? And my suggestion to you is you wait until they bring it up. Okay, so you don't suddenly switch from, well, you've got to realise you're seriously ill, you may not, blah, blah, blah. So wait till they bring it up, and they will do. They absolutely will bring it up with you. And then you can start to share, well, this is what I believe happens, and whatever your beliefs are, share with your patients. One of the things I've experienced with several people is that they need to resolve whatever they don't want to leave until everything is in order. I don't know if you've noticed that at all, but I've noticed that with several people. One of them was a man who was pretty well known in where we lived. And he was a director of a large organisation, but he was also the treasurer of the local church. And he got melanoma, and this thing just went through his body like within 2-3 weeks. I mean, it was unbelievable the speed this thing just went through him. But his concern was that there was nobody in the church that had taken over the books. Now, you may think, oh, that wasn't all that important. To him, it was huge. It was really important to him. And so it took the church committee 2-3 weeks, I think, to actually find someone who would take over. They spent some time with this man, and within literally 2 days of him handing over the books and explaining how he ran the treasury for the church, he passed. So he was hanging on until this final bit of the puzzle was in place. The other one which springs to mind, was a lady who had been married 3 times. She got 5 children. She got 2 living with her. One was 7 and one was 12. And her concern was that she got no look after the children. So I was giving her healing, and she kept talking about the kids and this, and they like you and they like you. And I thought, okay. So I thought, well, maybe this is what her plan is, but it's not my plan. So I went to the local council and explained the situation, and they got social services to come and see this lady. To cut a long story short, they introduced 2 or 3 different people who wanted to adopt. They found someone that really liked the kids. The mother really liked this lady and her husband. And again, once that was settled, within 2 to 3 weeks, she made her transition. So I think often we need to just be at peace with ourselves and everything's in order. The other important issue to bear in mind is that the last sensation that we lose is our hearing. And so although it may appear that we're totally out of it in the last few hours of our existence on this plane, we can still hear. So be careful what you say if you're sitting around people that are on this journey or lead me to the journey. I think somewhere in it actually tells you more of that. Yeah, the way that the body actually prepares itself, the final stage is first of all coolness. The person's hands, arms and feet and legs may become increasingly cold to the touch, and at the same time the colour of the skin may change. The underside of the body may become darker, the skin may become mottled. This is a normal indication that the circulation of the blood is decreasing to the body's extremities, being reserved for the most vital organs. What can you do? You keep the person warm with a blanket, and you shouldn't use an electric blanket. Sleeping, the person may spend an increasing amount of time sleeping and appear to be uncommunicative or responsive and difficult to arouse. This is normal, it's a part of the change of the metabolism of the body. You can sit with your loved one, hold his or her hand, don't shake them or speak too loudly, but speak softly and naturally. And speak to them directly as you would do normally, and never assume that the person cannot hear you, because hearing is the last sense that will be lost. Disorientation, the person may seem confused, about the time, the place, and the identity of people surrounding him or her and close family members. Again, this is due to, in part, the metabolic changes. What can you do? Identify yourself by your name, and rather asking the person to guess who you are, just speak softly and quietly and truthfully. Incontinence, again, people may start to lose control of their bladder and the bowel functions as the muscles in that area start to relax. Sometimes it's physical restlessness. I remember this with my mum. In the last few hours, she was incredibly restless. The breathing patterns start to change. So it really is just a closing down of all the bodily functions, if you will. So it's perfectly natural, it's perfectly normal, and it's something which, if you can be part of, it really is a privilege to be there. So once that's happened, we, as if we've lost somebody ourselves, we go through a process, a grieving process. And again, that's part of what you'll be called on to do with your healing, is to actually help people through this grieving process. And again, it's a perfectly natural and normal thing. But there's no fixed time to grieve. You know, I've heard people say, well, yeah, it's been 3 weeks now since they've gone. You've got to get on with your life. And, you know, oh yeah, right. It takes, I believe it takes longer than that. So you've got to allow people to go through whatever process they want to go through.
You know, I think I've worked with a lot of people with indefinite dying, who are in grief. And I do think sometimes it's the way it's internalized. So I think there is a natural grieving process, and to your point, it is about honouring the person. But I think we need to be careful of the distinction of honouring the person by staying in grief and not fully living your life, and honouring the person and being able to be free. And a lot of that has to do with processing the way that we are thinking about it, the way that we are experiencing the past of that person. Especially if it's been a long, slower death, like a disease that somebody's been suffering from, like cancer. Because I think when there's that, there's the person before the illness, and then there's the person who had the illness, and you know, it isn't the same person. So I think sometimes in our work, it's about how do we help people remember who the person actually was without the suffering of the disease, so that they have happy memories